The door shouldn't have been knocking. Not at this hour, not in this cold. Samuel Harding stood in the center of his kitchen, coffee cup halfway to his lips, listening to the sound repeat itself, 3 soft taps, hesitant, like whoever stood outside wasn't sure they had the right to be there. He set the cup down slowly. The fire in the hearth crackled, throwing shadows across the rough timber walls. Outside, the wind moved through the valley with a low moan, carrying the scent of coming snow. November in Montana territory wasn't forgiving. It didn't ask questions, it just took. Samuel crossed the room and paused at the door, his hand resting on the iron latch. He was a man in his late 50s, broad-shouldered but lean, his face weathered by decades of sun and silence. He'd built this ranch with his own hands after the war, after everything else had burned. He'd built it for solitude. He opened the door. A girl stood on his porch. She couldn't have been more than 16. Her dress was torn at the hem, mud-stained and threadbare. Her hair hung in dark tangles around her face, and her eyes, wide, brown and terrified, locked onto his. Behind her, pressed against her side, was a boy, maybe 8 years old. His face was pale, his lips cracked, and he clutched his sister's hand like it was the only thing keeping him upright. Neither of them said a word. Samuel's gaze moved past them, scanning the darkening meadow beyond. No wagon, no horse, no sign of how they'd gotten here. "Where'd you come from?" he asked, his voice rough from disuse. The girl swallowed. Her breath came out in short, visible clouds. "We walked." "From where?" She hesitated, her eyes dropped to the porch boards. "Fort Benton." Samuel's jaw tightened. Fort Benton was 40 miles north, through open country, through cold that could kill a grown man if he wasn't careful. "You walked 40 miles, he said flatly. She nodded. The boy swayed slightly, and the girl steadied him, her arm wrapping around his thin shoulders. Samuel noticed the way her hands trembled, not from cold alone. "What's your name?" he asked. "Eliza," she whispered, then tilting her head toward the boy, "This is Thomas." Samuel looked at them for a long moment. The wind picked up again, pulling at the edges of Eliza's dress. She didn't flinch. She just stood there, holding her brother, waiting for whatever judgment Samuel would pass. He stepped aside. "Get in." Eliza's eyes widened. She didn't move at first, as if she couldn't believe what she'd heard. Then she guided Thomas forward, her hand firm on his back, and they stepped into the warmth of the cabin. Samuel closed the door behind them and crossed to the fire. He added another log, then turned to face them. They stood near the threshold, dripping melted frost onto the floor, their bodies rigid with exhaustion. "Sit," he said, nodding toward the table. Eliza led Thomas to a chair and eased him down. The boy's head drooped forward, his eyes barely open. Samuel moved to the stove and poured 2 cups of coffee, then thought better of it and reached for a pot of stew he'd made that morning. He ladled it into bowls and set them on the table without a word. Eliza stared at the food like it might vanish if she blinked. "Eat," Samuel said. She picked up the spoon slowly, then handed it to Thomas first. The boy ate in small, careful bites, his hands shaking. Eliza waited until he'd had several spoonfuls before she took any for herself. Samuel leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching them. He didn't ask questions, not yet. He'd learned long ago that people told you what they needed to when they were ready, and sometimes silence was the only kindness you could offer. After a while, Thomas's head began to nod. Eliza caught him before he slumped forward, her arm around his shoulders again. She looked up at Samuel, her expression caught somewhere between gratitude and fear. "We have nowhere to go," she whispered. The words hung in the air, raw and honest. Samuel studied her face. There was something in her eyes, something older than 16, the kind of weight that came from carrying too much, too young. "What happened?" he asked quietly. Eliza's throat worked. She looked down at Thomas, smoothing his hair back from his forehead. "Our father died 2 months ago. Fever, our mother," her voice faltered. "She tried. She took work where she could, but the winter came early and the money ran out. She got sick too." Samuel's chest tightened. She died 3 days ago, Eliza finished, her voice barely audible. Thomas stirred slightly but didn't wake. Eliza held him closer. We had nothing left, she said. The landlord said we had to leave. I didn't know where to go. I just started walking. I remembered my father talking about this valley. He said there were good people here once. Samuel's jaw clenched. He turned away, staring into the fire. Good people. He wasn't sure he qualified. He'd spent the last 15 years keeping the world arm's length, keeping the ghosts of his past buried under work and silence. But when he looked back at Eliza and Thomas, at the exhaustion carved into their faces, at the way they clung to each other like the last solid thing in a collapsing world, he knew he couldn't turn them away. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. You'll stay here tonight, he said. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow. Eliza's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back quickly. Thank you, she breathed. Samuel nodded once, then moved to the back room. He returned with blankets and laid them out near the fire. You can sleep here, it's warm. Eliza helped Thomas to the makeshift bed, and the boy curled up immediately, asleep before his head touched the blanket. She sat beside him, her hand resting on his shoulder, and looked up at Samuel. I don't know how to repay you, she said. Don't worry about that, Samuel replied. He turned toward his own room, then paused. Get some rest. We'll talk in the morning. He left them there, closing the door to his room behind him. But sleep didn't come easy. He lay in the darkness, listening to the wind outside, and thought about the girl's words. We have nowhere to go. He'd heard those words before, a lifetime ago, in a voice that still haunted him. And this time, he wouldn't let them go unanswered. Morning came cold and clear. Samuel woke before dawn, as he always did, and dressed quietly. When he stepped into the main room, Eliza was already awake, sitting by the fire with her arms wrapped around her knees. Thomas still slept, his breathing soft and even. She looked up when Samuel entered, her expression guarded but hopeful. Morning, he said. Morning, she replied. Samuel moved to the stove and started a pot of coffee. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, it was careful, the kind of quiet that came when two people were figuring out how to trust each other. You sleep? He asked. A little. He nodded. He hadn't expected more. When the coffee was ready, he poured 2 cups and handed her one. She took it with both hands, letting the warmth seep into her fingers. I meant what I said last night, Samuel said, sitting down across from her. You can stay, both of you. Eliza's eyes widened. Stay here. For as long as you need. She stared at him, searching his face for some hidden condition, some trap. Why? Samuel took a slow sip of his coffee. It was a fair question. He wasn't sure he had a good answer. Because you need a place, he said finally, and I've got one. But you don't know us. No, he agreed, but I know what it's like to have nothing, and I know what it's like when someone decides that matters. Eliza's grip on the cup tightened, her eyes shone, but she didn't let the tears fall. We can work, she said quickly. I can cook, clean, Thomas can help with the animals when he's stronger, we won't be a burden. I'm not asking you to earn your keep, Samuel said. I'm offering you a home. The words seemed to knock the breath out of her. She looked away, down at the sleeping boy, and Samuel saw her shoulders tremble. I don't understand, she whispered. You don't have to. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked up at him again, and this time there was something fierce in her expression. If we stay, I need to know you mean it. I can't let Thomas think we're safe if we're not. Samuel met her gaze evenly. I mean it. She studied him, and whatever she saw there must have been enough, because she nodded slowly. Okay. The boy stirred then, blinking awake. He sat up, confused for a moment, then saw Eliza and relaxed. She moved to his side, brushing his hair back. Morning, Tommy, she said softly. Morning, he mumbled. His eyes found Samuel, wary but curious. This is Mr. Harding, Eliza said. We're going to stay with him for a while. Thomas looked between them, then nodded. He didn't ask questions. Samuel suspected the boy had learned early not to. Over the next few days, a rhythm began to form. Eliza took over the cooking without being asked, and Samuel found himself eating better than he had in years. She moved through the cabin with quiet efficiency, mending torn clothes, sweeping floors, organizing the clutter Samuel had long since stopped noticing. Thomas followed Samuel outside, watching as he fed the horses and mended fences. The boy didn't talk much, but his eyes were sharp, taking in everything. "You want to help?" Samuel asked one morning. Thomas nodded. Samuel handed him a brush. "Start with that one. Her name's Clover, she's gentle." Thomas approached the mare slowly, and Samuel watched as the boy's small hands moved over her coat with surprising care. There was something healing in the work, Samuel thought, something that didn't require words. But not everyone in the valley saw it that way. On the fourth day, Samuel rode into town for supplies. The general store was quiet, but the stairs weren't. He felt them as soon as he walked in. The eyes of men and women who'd known him for years, now watching him with something new. Suspicion, curiosity, judgment. At the counter, the storekeeper, a man named Dutch, leaned forward with a thin smile. "Heard you got yourself some company, Sam." Samuel didn't look up from his list. "That's right. 2 kids, they're saying, showed up out of nowhere. They walked from Fort Benton." Dutch let out a low whistle. "That's a hell of a walk. What are you planning to do with them?" "Let them stay." The words landed like a stone. Dutch's smile faded. "Stay for how long?" "As long as they need." A woman near the back of the store, Mrs. Calloway, the preacher's wife, turned sharply. "Mr. Harding, surely you're not serious. Those children need proper care, a family, not a bachelor rancher who lives alone in the hills." Samuel finally looked up, his gaze steady. "They've got care, they've got a roof, and they've got someone who won't turn them out." "But it's not proper," Mrs. Calloway insisted, moving closer. "A young girl, alone with a man, people will talk." "Let them," Samuel said flatly. Dutch shifted uncomfortably. "Sam, she's not wrong. Folks are already asking questions. You take in 2 orphans, no legal claim, no church blessing. It looks strange." "I don't care how it looks." "Well, you should," Mrs. Calloway snapped. "Because if you're not careful, someone might decide those children would be better off elsewhere. There are families in this town, Christian families." Samuel's jaw tightened. He set his list on the counter and leaned forward slightly. "Those kids came to my door half dead from cold and hunger. They've got no one. If you've got a family willing to take them both together, then bring them to me. Otherwise, they stay where they are." Mrs. Calloway's face flushed, but she said nothing. Dutch cleared his throat. "I'll get your order together, Sam." Samuel nodded and stepped outside, his chest tight with anger he hadn't felt in years. He rode back to the ranch in silence, the words echoing in his mind. "People will talk. They always did." But when he arrived home and saw Eliza standing on the porch, a smile breaking across her face as Thomas ran to greet him, Samuel knew he'd made the right choice. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. The letter came a week later. Samuel found it tucked into his door when he returned from checking the fence line. No stamp, no postmark, just his name written in careful, slanted script across the front. He unfolded it slowly. "Mr. Harding, it has come to the attention of the Territorial Child Welfare Committee that you are currently housing 2 minor children without legal guardianship or proper claim. While we commend your charitable impulse, we must insist that you present yourself and the children at the county office in Helena within 10 days to formalize custody arrangements, or the children will be remanded to the care of the state. Failure to comply will result in removal of said children by lawful authority. Respectfully, Mr. Seelers Kern, Territorial Child Welfare Officer." Samuel read it twice, his hands steady but his mind racing. He stepped inside and found Eliza at the stove, stirring a pot of beans. She looked up, smiling, then saw his face. "What's wrong?" He handed her the letter without a word. Her smile vanished as she read. When she finished, she looked up at him, her face pale. "They're going to take us." "No," Samuel said firmly, "they're not." "But it says." "I know what it says." He took the letter back, folding it carefully. "And we're going to deal with it, but no one's taking you anywhere unless I say so." Eliza's hands trembled. "What if they don't give you a choice?" Samuel met her eyes. "Then they'll have to go through me." Thomas appeared in the doorway, his expression uncertain. "What's happening?" Eliza moved to him quickly, kneeling down. "Nothing, Tommy, everything's fine." But the boy wasn't fooled. He looked at Samuel, his young face serious. "Are they going to make us leave?" Samuel crouched down to his level. "Listen to me. I made you a promise. You're staying here. I'm going to make sure of it." Thomas nodded slowly, but the fear didn't leave his eyes. Over the next 3 days, Samuel made the ride to Helena. The county office was a narrow building wedged between a saloon and a land surveyor's office, its windows dusty and its door warped from years of mountain weather. Inside, a clerk directed him to a back room where Silas Kern sat behind a desk stacked with folders and ledgers. Kern was a thin man in his 40s, with wire-rimmed glasses and the pinched expression of someone who believed rules were more important than people. He looked up when Samuel entered. "Mr. Harding, right on time." Samuel sat down without being invited. "I got your letter." "Good, then you understand the situation." "I understand you're threatening to take 2 kids away from the only stable home they've got." Kern folded his hands on the desk. "Mr. Harding, we're not threatening anyone. We're simply ensuring that these children are placed in an appropriate environment. You're an unmarried man with no familial connection to them. That raises concerns." "Concerns about what?" "About propriety, about whether you're equipped to provide the moral and social upbringing these children need." Samuel leaned forward. "They were starving, they had nowhere to go, I gave them a home, what more do they need?" "Structure," Kern said crisply. "Education, a proper family unit. There are several families in the territory who have expressed interest in adoption, good, Christian families with mothers and fathers." "Will they keep them together?" Kern hesitated. "That's not always possible, but each child would be placed in a loving home." "So you'd split them up?" "If necessary." Samuel's hands curled into fists. "That girl has kept her brother alive through hell. You're not separating them." "Mr. Harding, I understand your attachment, but I want to adopt them." Kern blinked. "Excuse me." "You heard me. I'll go through whatever legal process you need. I'll sign whatever papers, but those kids stay with me, together." Kern removed his glasses and cleaned them slowly. "Mr. Harding, adoption is a serious commitment. It requires proof of financial stability, a suitable living environment, and a moral character review. And frankly, your situation complicates things." "My situation?" "You live alone. You have no wife. There are questions about whether a man in your position should be raising a young girl." Samuel's voice dropped to something cold and dangerous. "Say what you mean." Kern replaced his glasses. "I mean that without a woman in the household, the arrangement appears inappropriate. If you were married, this would be a different conversation. So unless I've got a wife, you're taking them. Unless you can demonstrate that your home is suitable, yes." Samuel stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. "You've got 10 days, you said. I'll be back before then, and when I come back, you're going to approve this." Kern's expression didn't change. "We'll see, Mr. Harding." Samuel left without another word. The ride home felt longer than it was. His mind churned with possibilities, with arguments, with the grim reality that the law didn't care about what was right, it cared about what looked right. When he reached the ranch, Eliza was waiting on the porch. She stood when she saw him, her face tight with worry. "What did they say?" Samuel dismounted, and tied his horse. They want proof that I can provide a proper home. Can you? He looked at her, at the hope and fear warring in her eyes. I'm going to try. Thomas appeared behind her, and Samuel saw the way the boy's hand found his sister's. Are we leaving? Thomas asked quietly. Eliza turned to Samuel, waiting. He looked at both of them, these two kids who'd stumbled into his life and somehow become the thing he didn't know he'd been missing. No, he said, you're not leaving, I'll figure this out. But as he said it, he wasn't sure how. That night, sitting alone by the fire after the children had gone to sleep, Samuel stared into the flames and wondered what the hell he was going to do. The answer came 2 days later. Not from him. From her. Her name was Catherine Brennan. Samuel had known her for years, not well, but in the way people know each other in small communities where everyone's paths cross eventually. She owned a seamstress shop in town, a narrow storefront with lace curtains and a painted sign that read Brennan's Fine Tailoring. She was a widow, maybe 40, with auburn hair she wore pinned up and eyes that carried the kind of sadness that came from loss, but hadn't turned bitter. She showed up at his ranch on a cold afternoon, riding a dappled mare and carrying a basket covered with cloth. Samuel was chopping wood when he saw her approach. He set down the axe and waited, confused. Catherine dismounted and walked toward him, her expression calm but purposeful. Mr. Harding. Mrs. Brennan, he wiped his hands on his pants, wasn't expecting company. I imagine not, she held up the basket. I brought bread, and I'd like to talk if you have a moment. Samuel glanced toward the cabin, where Eliza was visible through the window, kneading dough. All right. They walked to the porch, and Catherine set the basket down. She didn't sit. Instead, she turned to face him directly. I heard about the letter, she said. Samuel's jaw tightened. News travels fast. It does, and I heard what Silas Kern told you. Then you know it's none of your business. Catherine didn't flinch. You're right, it's not, but I'm making it my business anyway. Samuel frowned. Why? She took a breath, her hands folding in front of her. Because I know what you're trying to do, and I know you can't do it alone. I'm managing. Are you? She looked past him, toward the window where Eliza worked. That girl is terrified Thea. Going to take her brother, and you're running out of time to prove you can keep them. Samuel said nothing. Catherine's voice softened. I lost my husband 4 years ago. Cholera, we never had children. I've spent the last 4 years living alone, working alone, trying to convince myself that was enough. She paused. It's not. Samuel stuttered her. What are you saying? I'm saying that if you need a wife to keep those children, then marry me. The words hung in the air like smoke. Samuel stared at her. You're serious? Completely. You don't even know me. I know enough. Catherine's gaze didn't waver. I know you took in 2 orphans when no one else would. I know you're willing to fight for them. And I know that sometimes doing the right thing means making an arrangement that isn't perfect but is good enough. Samuel shook his head slowly. You'd marry a stranger for 2 kids you've never met. I'd marry a good man who needs help, Catherine corrected. And yes, for 2 children who deserve better than being torn apart by bureaucrats who care more about appearances than lives. Samuel turned away, staring out at the valley. The wind moved through the grass, carrying the scent of pine and cold earth. He thought about the letter, about Kern's smug certainty, about the look in Eliza's eyes when she'd asked if they were leaving. It wouldn't be a real marriage, he said quietly. I know. It'd be an arrangement for their sake. I understand. He looked back at her. Why would you do this? Catherine's expression softened. Because I've been alone long enough to know what it costs, and because those children shouldn't have to pay for the world's cruelty. Samuel was quiet for a long time, then he nodded once. All right. Catherine exhaled, something like relief crossing her face. All right. But we do this properly, Samuel added. You move in, you have your own space. We make it look real so Kern has no ground to stand on, and when the kids are older, if you want to leave, you can. Agreed. They shook hands, firm and businesslike, and Samuel felt the weight of the decision settle over him like a heavy coat. That evening, he told Eliza and Thomas. They sat at the table, the three of them, and Samuel explained as simply as he could. Mrs. Brennan is going to marry me. It's so the court will approve your adoption, so you can stay. Eliza's eyes went wide. You're getting married for us. Yes. But she looked confused, overwhelmed. You don't have to. Yes, I do, Samuel said, and I want to. Thomas looked between them. Is she nice? Samuel allowed a small smile. She is. Will she like us? The boy asked. She already does. Eliza's eyes filled with tears, and this time she didn't try to stop them. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. She stood abruptly and crossed to him, wrapping her arms around his shoulders in a fierce hug. Samuel stiffened, surprised, then slowly lifted his hand to pat her back. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you. Thomas joined them, his small arms wrapping around Samuel's waist, and for the first time in 15 years, Samuel Harding felt something crack open inside his chest, something he thought he'd buried with his past. He wasn't alone anymore. None of them were. Catherine moved in 3 days later. She brought her belongings in a single trunk and set up in the small side rooms Samuel had cleared for her. She was efficient, kind, and careful not to intrude. She cooked alongside Eliza, mended clothes with her, and talked to Thomas about books and horses and the way the mountains looked in winter. And slowly, the house that had been silent for so long began to feel like something else. Like a home. On the night before they were set to return to Helena, the four of them sat by the fire. No one spoke much, but the quiet wasn't empty. It was full. Silas Kern did not look pleased when Samuel returned to his office. This time Catherine was with him. She wore a simple but respectable dress, her hair pinned neatly, her hands folded in her lap as she sat beside Samuel across from Kern's desk. Kern looked between them, his expression tight. Mrs. Brennan, I wasn't aware you'd be joining us. I'm Mrs. Harding now, Catherine said calmly. We were married 4 days ago. Kern's jaw worked. He reached for a file on his desk and flipped it open. I see, and this was sudden. It was necessary, Samuel said. Mr. Harding, you do understand that the court looks unfavorably on marriages of convenience, designed solely to. It's not a convenience, Catherine interrupted. It's a commitment to Samuel, to those children, and to the life we're building together. Kern studied her, searching for cracks. He found none. I've brought documentation, Samuel said, sliding a folder across the desk. Financial records, property deed, letters from neighbors attesting to our character, and a letter from Reverend Collins confirming the marriage. Kern opened the folder slowly, his eyes scanning the contents, his lips pressed into a thin line. Everything's in order, Samuel said. We have a stable home, steady income, a married household. You said that's what you needed. Kern set the folder down, and the children, they're adjusting. They're thriving, Catherine said. Eliza helps with the house. Thomas is learning to work the ranch. They're happy. And you're prepared to raise them as your own, legally. Yes, Samuel and Catherine said in unison. Kern leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming on the desk. For a long moment he said nothing, then he sighed. Very well, he pulled out a form and began writing. I'll approve the adoption, both children, joint custody between you and Mrs. Harding. Samuel felt something loosen in his chest. But understand, Kern added, looking up sharply, if there are any complaints, any signs that these children are not being properly cared for, this decision can be revisited. There won't be, Samuel said. Kern finished the paperwork and slid it across the desk. Sign here. Samuel signed, then Catherine, their names side by side, binding them to two children who'd walked out of the cold and into their lives. When they left the office, Catherine touched Samuel's arm lightly. "We did it." "We did," he agreed. They rode back to the ranch in the late afternoon light, the mountains rising around them like sentinels. When they crested the final hill, Samuel saw smoke rising from the chimney. Eliza had kept the fire going. As they approached, the door opened, and both children ran out onto the porch. Eliza's face was tight with anxiety. "What happened?" Samuel dismounted and walked to her. He held up the signed papers. "You're ours, legally, both of you." Eliza's knees buckled slightly, and Samuel caught her, steadying her. She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "Really? Really?" Thomas whooped and threw his arms around Samuel's legs. Catherine laughed, a sound full of warmth, and joined them on the porch. That night they ate together as a family for the first time, not as strangers, not as charity, but as something real. As the fire burned low and the children drifted off to sleep in their beds, Samuel and Catherine sat in the quiet. "Thank you," Samuel said. Catherine smiled. "You've already thanked me." "I mean it." "I know," she looked at him, her expression soft. "This wasn't what I expected, but I think it's what I needed." Samuel nodded. "Me too." They sat in comfortable silence, and for the first time in a long time, Samuel Harding felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Bees. The seasons turned. Winter came, harsh and unforgiving, but the cabin stayed warm. Eliza learned to bake bread that rivaled Catherine's, and Thomas grew strong helping Samuel with the animals. Catherine's laughter became a familiar sound, and slowly the boundaries they'd set began to blur, not into something romantic, but into something deeper: partnership, trust, family. By spring, the arrangement no longer felt like an arrangement at all. One evening, as Samuel sat on the porch watching the sun set over the valley, Catherine joined him. She didn't say anything at first. She just sat beside him, her shawl wrapped around her shoulders. "They're good kids," she said eventually. "They are. You did a good thing, Sam." He glanced at her. "We did." She smiled. "Yes, we did." Inside, Eliza was teaching Thomas a song their mother used to sing. Their voices drifted out through the open window, soft and clear. Samuel closed his eyes and listened. Years later, when people asked Eliza how she and Thomas had ended up on Samuel Harding's ranch, she would smile and say, "We knocked on a door, and he opened it." But what she never said, what she kept close to her heart, was what Samuel had whispered to her that first night, when she'd told him they had nowhere to go. He'd knelt down, looked her in the eye, and said, "Then stay, stay forever." And they had. The wind moved through the valley, carrying the scent of wildflowers and hay. The ranch stood solid against the horizon, smoke rising from the chimney, voices drifting from the open windows. A home, not built from blood or obligation, but from choice. And that, Samuel thought, was worth everything.